Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. Você gosta de fogo? Você gosta de armas de fogo? Talvez você vá gostar desse vídeo. Hey folks, my name is Sumido and welcome to my review of Flame Gunner. Flame Gunner is a third-person shooter developed by Gaps Inc. and published by Tecmo. It was released in arcades in 1999 and tasked you with clearing several objective-based stages on a multiple-choice path in an effort to save the day. Flame Gunner pits you and another player in objective-based missions where you must complete said objective to pass the stage. Usually this involves defeating a set number of enemies. After completing a mission, you are given the choice of which mission you would like to select next, with a description of what that mission's objective is. If you die during a mission, you are given the choice to continue, which completely restores your health and bombs. This also resets the timer on time-based missions. Failing a mission allows you to continue, which will bring you back to your last mission select screen you were at prior to failing. Your only weapons of choice in Flame Gunner are your firearm and bombs. There is no need for reloading, and so you can fire constantly. You can move in 8 directions, and your aim is tied to the direction you are moving in. The game has a lock-on system where you'll see an icon over enemies when you're aimed directly at them and can hit them accurately, but it is not necessary to lock on in order to hit and damage enemies. Enemies can also lock onto you, and this is indicated by a flashing reticle hovering over your player character. You can avoid being hit by dodging or sprinting. Enemies have a health bar, which needs to be drained completely before they're dead. They can display a quote-unquote knocked over animation, where they're still capable of being damaged. In this sense, you can stun-lock enemies, but they can do the same to you. Missions will randomly generate pickups, and they are medkits, which restore your health, bombs, which replenish your bombs, and weapon, which I couldn't tell what it did, but I believe it increases your damage output. At the end of each mission, your stats are graded based upon your performance. Flame Gunner features 3 playable characters, Kai, Tiala, and Falcon, all of whom play identically, so pick whoever you want. Now let's talk missions. I hope not to confuse you while describing them all. All 3 characters start off in different missions. Kai begins in an outdoor area where you must defeat 14 enemies before taking on the game's first boss, an APC. This boss is very easy to defeat, as all you need to do is obtain a lock on it. Its gunfire can be avoided even at walking speeds. Tiala begins in a fuel room, where she must destroy a fuel tank by shooting at it in 3 separate areas, while simultaneously defeating enemies. Falcon begins in an outdoor area, where he simply must defeat 28 enemies, divided into 2 segments by this neat little cutscene. Following these initial missions, your options remain the same. From here, you can either break through the opponent's base at the front line, or get all the terrorists at the front line under complete control. Let's stick with one path for now. We'll revisit the other one later. Breaking through the opponent's front line puts you on a moving platform towards the mission's exit, while enemies fire at you left, right, and center. This mission is pretty easy, since you only have to worry about aiming and shooting, essentially making it a rail shooter segment. From here, you have 5 options. Get the guard force under complete control, smuggle yourself into the hall, break through the wind tunnel room, block their route of weapon supply, and get all the terrorists at the front line under complete control. Again, staying on one path, let's pick getting the guard force under complete control. This mission involves defeating 11 enemies within 80 seconds. One of the enemies is a turret, and smoke randomly pops up in front of you, which obscures your view and makes it difficult to get a lock on enemies. This is probably the first part of the game where you'll fail, at least it was for me, but with persistence, you'll make it. From here, you have 2 options. Block their transportation route, or smuggle yourself into the hall. Let's choose to block their transportation route. This mission involves defeating 10 enemies within 70 seconds. Your view in the stage is constantly being obscured by a moving conveyor belt of assorted items, making it difficult to get a lock on enemies. This stage isn't too difficult, as long as you don't get an unlucky enemy placement. From here, you have 3 options. Break through the Bayport route, disable the control of the satellite, and smuggle yourself into the hall. Sticking with our leftmost route, let's break through the Bayport route. This mission is pretty straightforward, tasking you with defeating 16 enemies. Aside from the difficulty of trying to get a lock on the enemies on the walkway opposite you and not getting sniped by them, this is a pretty easy mission. From here, you have 3 options. Escape from the warehouse with a hostage, break through the corridor to the control room, and disable the control of the satellite. In line with our pre-established route, let's escape from the warehouse with a hostage. If you weren't feeling frustrated with this game yet, you will be now. This mission tasks you with escorting a hostage to the exit within 75 seconds while fending off enemies. If the hostage gets shot, she runs away and needs to be retrieved. Also, walk, don't run, or else you'll leave her behind. This is also the first mission on this path where you encounter a new stronger enemy type that boasts more health and a minigun. The best strategy for this level is to make a beeline for the exit while merely subduing enemies, not outright killing them, since that wastes precious time. If you're lucky enough that the hostage doesn't get stuck, you should complete the mission with plenty of time to spare. From here, you have 3 options: liberate the blockaded bridge, secure the control of their satellite, or break through the corridor to the control room. Following along the route, liberating the blockaded bridge places you smack dab in the middle of your second boss battle against a guy wielding 2 assault rifles and 3 of his mooks. Don't be fooled by the graphics. You can be shot right through a barricade. Since the mooks respawn infinitely, I'd advise gunning straight for the boss. From here, you have 2 options: rush to the launching site using their dory car, and secure the control of their satellite. Let's select the leftmost option, rushing to the launching site using their dory car. This mission tasks you with defeating 24 enemies. Sounds simple enough, right?
Nope.
You'll find yourself taking on tougher than average mooks, and more likely than not being subject to a bullet bukkake. This is the first mission on this path where you encounter flamethrower-wielding enemies. Like before, persistence is key here. From here, your sole option is to beat the boss and delete the target data of their military satellite. However, before moving on to the final mission, let's take a look at all the other options you have in this game. Going back to the 4th set of options you are given, let's smuggle ourselves into the hall. Selecting this mission puts you smack dab in the middle of a boss fight with an acrobatic assailant with an affinity for timed explosives. He crawls and leaps around, dropping said explosives, while intermittently making himself vulnerable. Overall, this is quite an easy battle. From here you have 3 options: block their ocean transportation route, disable the control of the satellite, and break through the wind tunnel room. Let's disable the control of the satellite. In this mission, you are tasked with destroying 7 computers in 50 seconds while fending off enemies. The computers have 3 layers to them, and I believe they require somewhere between 10 and 20 shots each to destroy. The nice thing is that enemy fire can damage the computers, and if you play it right, you can line up enemies with the computers to streamline the mission. Overall, a quite easy mission. From here, you have 3 options: break through the Bayport route, break through the corridor to the control room, and avoid the opponent's cordon and smuggle into the building from the roof. Let's break through the corridor to the control room. In this mission, you are first tasked with defeating 10 enemies in a narrow corridor. Following this, you must destroy a gate while fending off enemies. As difficult as it may be, you'll want to focus more on destroying the gate than the enemies here. Once this is complete, you'll finally be tasked with defeating 10 more enemies. This part of the mission can be a bit overwhelming, especially when an enemy pops up to your left, but it's still manageable. From here, you have 3 options: secure the control of their satellite, escape from the warehouse with a hostage, and hinder their destruction work. Let's secure the control of their satellite. This mission tasks you with defending a control panel from enemy fire for 60 seconds. Enemies come from all directions, with some gunning for you and others the control panel. You need to be careful, as your own fire can damage the control panel as well. This is a pretty simple mission, and I was lucky enough to complete it my first try. From here, you have 3 options: liberate the blockaded bridge, block the installation of their satellite control system, and collect the control data of their military satellite. Let's choose to block the installation of their satellite control system. This mission tasks you with defeating 24 enemies, and is essentially a copy of the rushing to the launching site using their dory car mission. Like in that mission, you'll constantly find yourself getting stun-locked here in a barrage of bullets, but through persistence, you'll achieve victory. From here, you have 2 options: rush to the launching site using their dory car, and get all the escaped terrorists under complete control. You already know which one I'm gonna pick, and man, I feel bad for the unlucky son of a bitch who picks this mission. You're tasked with preventing 7 enemies at max from escaping via 2 exits for 60 seconds. Sounds simple, right?
Nope.
You have to simultaneously defeat enemies while ensuring they don't reach the exits. Some enemies will be gunning for you, while others run straight to the exits. What's worse, some of the enemies who initially attack you will make a beeline for the exits after a period of time. As far as I could tell, this mission is impossible to complete solo without cheats. It may be doable with 2 players, but I didn't have another human being to test that theory. The only way I managed to complete this mission was by turning on invincibility, and even then, I just barely scraped by. This also leads to the final mission, but we're not quite ready to discuss that yet. Let's go back to breaking through the wind tunnel room. This mission tasks you with destroying 8 cable boxes within 60 seconds. You'll need to either fend off or ignore enemies while tending to the cable boxes. I suggest dividing your focus equally between the cable boxes and enemies. Overall, a decently simple and easy mission. From here, you have two options. Smuggle yourself into the hall, and avoid the opponent's cordon and smuggle into the building from the roof. Selecting the latter puts you into a boss battle against an attack helicopter. This is a pretty easy boss battle. Just keep on the move and switching between the two perspectives to avoid the helicopter's gunfire and rockets. From here you have two options. Hydra their destruction work, and get the guard force under complete control and disturb their information network. Let's choose the former. Hydraing their destruction work tasks you with defeating 7 opponent workers before they can blow up 4 vats via a panel in the upper right corner of the level. This mission is pretty easy. Target the opponent workers, but don't neglect the other enemies either. Try to line them all up if possible. From here you have 3 options. Break through the corridor to the control room, collect the control data of the military satellite, and protect the hostages and set them free. Let's collect the control data of the military satellite. This mission puts you into a boss battle against 2 women, one wielding a flamethrower and the other an assault rifle. The one with the assault rifle tends to bounce around after taking fire, so it's best to focus first on the flamethrower wielding one. As always, it's best to try and line them up and damage them both simultaneously. Overall, a pretty easy battle considering it's stacked against you. From here, you have 3 options. Secure the control of their satellite, block the installation of their satellite control system, and get all the escaped terrorists under complete control. Since we've already reviewed these options, let's go back to getting the guard force under complete control and disturbing their information network. This mission tasks you with defeating 12 enemies. It's not a particularly unique mission, and I don't have much to say about it. There's no unique options from there, so let's go to protect the hostages and set them free. This mission involves saving more than 7 hostages within 60 seconds. Hostages will run across the level while enemies appear trying to shoot both them and you. You need to exercise caution in this mission, as hostages can get caught in the crossfire. By playing carefully and aiming solely for your enemies, you should be able to complete this mission in one try. From there, you have no more unique options. So let's go all the way back to the first choice you are given, and select getting all the terrorists at the front line under control. This mission involves defeating 18 enemies within 50 seconds. This stage 2 is pretty easy, since the enemies line up on the walkways above, like a shooting gallery. From here, you have 2 options. Break through the opponent's base at the front line, and block their route of weapon supply. Let's pick the latter. Blocking their route of weapon supply tasks you with destroying 13 commodities within 50 seconds. 3 moving conveyor belts with items on them are placed around the level, and you must destroy 13 of said items while fending off enemies. Though this mission may sound easy enough, it can be difficult to get a lock on the items, especially when you're under fire. You may need to reattempt this one before completing it. If you've made it this far, then congratulations, because those were all the missions in the game. Now let's move on to the final mission. Beating the boss and deleting the target data of their military satellite. This mission puts you into the final boss fight, where the boss sits atop a platform to the side while you're caught between 6 turrets. You can shoot and temporarily disable the turrets, but not outright destroy them. While this is happening, the boss will occasionally take pot shots at you with an anti-material rifle and launch mortars at you. Given what a clusterfuck this mission is, I suggest just shooting the boss outright rather than making a feeble attempt to disable the turrets. Following this, you are treated to the end cutscene and credits. Overall, I give Flame Gunner's gameplay a 3 out of 5 stars. Flame Gunner runs on Tecmo's TPS hardware, which from my understanding is a derivative of the Sony PlayStation hardware. The graphics do indeed appear identical as something you'd expect to see on the original PlayStation. While character models are fully 3D, backgrounds are pre-rendered and appear to be based on full-motion videos, judging by how seamlessly cutscene transitions occur. As expected with 32-bit hardware, aliasing is quite apparent in this game, as is a bit of compression in the backgrounds. However, the latter isn't too noticeable when you're in the heat of battle. One neat touch I find about most levels is how you can interact with the environment, for example destroying random items unassociated with a given mission, like windows or a container. I also appreciate the different perspectives that some of the missions have. Another neat little detail is how the mission images change based upon which route you take. If you can finagle it, this game looks its best on a CRT display, and I assume that is what it originally ran on. I should note that, as of MAME version 0.253, this game's graphics are imperfectly emulated. Despite this, I did not notice any sort of graphical glitches. Granted, I haven't played this game in its original format, so I have nothing to compare it to. Overall, I give Flame Gunner's graphics a 3 out of 5 stars. Flame Gunner is an action-packed game, and the sound effects sure let you know it. Each mission pricks your ears with the sounds of gunfire, explosions, and grunts. On top of this are several dancey beats which are sprinkled selectively throughout missions. They all seem to be appropriate for the era this game was released in, and although they may sound repetitive here, you don't notice this during gameplay. Like with the graphics, this game's sound is imperfectly emulated as of MAME version 0.253. Again, I did not notice any audio glitches while playing, though I have no experience with a real Flame Gunner cabinet to compare it to. Overall, I give Flame Gunner's sound a 3 out of 5 stars. With all other elements of this game having been judged, I give Flame Gunner a 3 out of 5 stars. It's a vast and varied third-person shooter with run-and-gun elements that will satisfy your action cravings as you progress through the game. I also find the multiple choice routes interesting, and they certainly add replay value to the game. However, one thing I don't like in this game is how the difficulty scales. With the exception of the final one, boss battles are too easy, and their difficulty level never changes no matter how far along you are in the game. I am also frustrated by the quarter-munching difficulty spike you experience in the penultimate missions of the game. On another note, the control scheme managed to work very well for being an arcade game, and the soundtrack blends in nicely with the action. I get the feeling that this game would be better with 2 players. Now it's time to find out the SSRP, or Sumido suggested retail price. If you encountered this game out in the wild, how much should you pay for one play? At most, I'd say 50 cents. This game certainly keeps your attention, but I wouldn't put any more real money into a cabinet following a death or failure. So, what can you do after having played all there is to play in Flame Gunner? You can scratch your head at the fact that neither the intro nor a track mode play if you set the game to free play. You can try and find out just who the hell Gaps Inc. is. There is extremely little information about them online. From what I can ascertain, they were a Japanese video game developer that released or worked on a handful of games in the 90s. Equally difficult to find is information on this very game itself. Now, I know this is just an arcade game, but I was surprised at how little the game attempts to provide a story or background information. You're just thrown into vague missions with no who, what, when, where, why, or how. For God's sake, the enemies are usually just referred to by their. From what I could find online, the premise of this game is supposedly that you must stop the terrorist menace on the way through the enemy base on the facility of the Cordelia Space Center, where he is developing weapons of mass destruction. Hurry up, eliminate all the enemies, and the maniac's bosses for neutralize the threat and avoid an impending nuclear attack to keep peace and save the world. At the end of the day, you may just chalk this up to shoddy translation work. Speaking of which, the version of the game you've been watching in this video is the export version. There is also a Japanese release of this game. It is near identical to the export version, save for a few minor differences. You are presented with what I believe are mission descriptions prior to playing a given mission. This version of the game also lets you know when you're about to fight a boss, and gives you an idea of what kind of attacks they have up their sleeves. Also, just in my opinion, the Japanese version of the game seems a bit more difficult, as I noted I was getting stun-locked and spammed with bombs earlier in the game than with the export version. This is despite the fact I played the Japanese version under default difficulty settings, just as I had with the export version. Despite being released on PlayStation-esque hardware, Flame Gunner has not yet seen a release outside of the arcades. If for some reason you're a mad lad who wants to own a Flame Gunner arcade cabinet, I wish you the best of luck. I was having a hard time even locating a picture of a Flame Gunner cabinet before coming across this YouTube video by Arcade Belgium, in which the individual recording the video passes by a Flame Gunner cabinet. It appears to be a generic Japanese style cabinet, and I'm unsure if it's original or not. Personally, you're better off finding a PCB. Over on Zach's Amusements, a used Flame Gunner PCB is being sold for about 213 burger bucks. They're also selling a Flame Gunner ROM board for about 66 burger bucks. In times past, this game seems to have sold for even less. In 2016, this user on the NeoGeo.com forum gave away a Flame Gunner PCB in a raffle which included paying $10 to the winner via PayPal. In 2008, the website CoinOp Express had a Flame Gunner PCB for sale for 80 burger bucks. Over on eBay, someone is selling a Flame Gunner display for 12 burger bucks. It appears to be little more than a marquee, and puzzlingly, the seller erroneously attributes the game to Namco. A more complete display set is being sold on EmporiumRetroGamingShop.com for about 37 burger bucks. Well, that about wraps up my review of Flame Gunner. I would appreciate your feedback of this review. In particular, what you think I can do to improve future videos. I'm also curious if you've ever played this game before, and I'd like to hear your experience with it. Until next time, tenha bom dia e uma boa noite.